The night was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life. Sophia had waited 9 long months, enduring the pain, the sleepless nights, and the endless worries that came with carrying 3 little lives inside her. She was weak, exhausted, yet hopeful. Tonight was the night she was finally going to meet her children. But instead of holding her hand, whispering words of comfort, and standing by her side like a loving husband should, David was nowhere to be found. Sophia gripped the edge of the bed, her face pale as waves of pain shot through her body. The contractions came harder and closer, her breathing turned shallow, and she reached desperately for her phone. She needed him. She needed her husband, the man she had trusted with her heart, her life, and now, the lives of their unborn children. She dialed his number with trembling hands, tears clouding her eyes. "David, it's time," she whispered through her tears. "I can't do this alone. Please hurry." But what she didn't know was that David was holding another phone to his ear, not hers. Across town, in a luxurious apartment glowing with golden lights, Clara, his secret lover, purred into the receiver. Her voice was sweet, tempting, and poisonous all at once. "David, I need you tonight. Forget everything else. Just be with me." Her words slid like silk into his ears. And in that moment, David made the cruelest choice a husband could ever make. He looked at his wedding band, hesitated for a heartbeat, and then slipped it into his pocket as though it meant nothing. He stood, buttoned his shirt, and with one last glance at the phone Sophia had just called from, he turned his back on his wife and their unborn children. Sophia's cries echoed in the silence of their small home. Alone, clutching her stomach, she tried to breathe through the pain. She whispered his name again and again, as if repeating it could somehow bring him back. But no one answered, no one came. Outside, the night grew colder. The world seemed merciless as Sophia's body shook with agony. She had given David everything, her youth, her trust, her love. And now, when she needed him the most, he abandoned her for another woman's embrace. The clock ticked past midnight. Sophia collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, her phone slipping from her hand. Her vision blurred, but through the haze of pain, one thought kept her alive. "I must protect my babies. Even if I'm alone, I will bring them into this world." And while Sophia fought for her life and the lives of her children, David was raising a glass of wine with Clara, laughing, as if he had no wife, no home, no responsibility. But fate was watching, and the price of betrayal was already on its way. The hospital hallway was a blur of white lights and rushing footsteps. Sophia's body trembled as 2 nurses wheeled her through the emergency doors. Her skin was drenched in sweat, her face pale, but her spirit clung desperately to life. The pain came in waves so fierce she thought her body might shatter. Yet through the agony, her mind clung to one thought: "I must stay alive for my babies." "Stay with us, ma'am," the nurse urged, gripping Sophia's hand firmly. "You're strong. You can do this. Just breathe." Sophia tried to focus, but her chest tightened with fear. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Where is my husband? He promised he would be here. He promised." The nurse exchanged a sorrowful glance with the doctor. No one knew where David was, and no one had time to ask. The priority was saving Sophia and her unborn children. The contractions tore through her like fire. Sophia bit down on her lip to stifle a scream, her body arching from the pain. She had imagined this moment so differently. In her dreams, David would hold her hand, kiss her forehead, and whisper words of courage. Instead, she felt nothing but emptiness. The bed beside her was cold, and the silence of his absence was louder than any scream. The doctor, a tall man with calm but serious eyes, leaned over. "Sophia, you're strong, but we need to move quickly. Your babies are coming sooner than expected, and their lives depend on you holding on. Do you understand?" Her head nodded weakly. "Please, save them," she pleaded. "I don't care about me. Just save them." Those words pierced the doctor's heart. He had seen many mothers give birth, but rarely one so selfless, so willing to sacrifice everything. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We'll fight for all of you." Inside the delivery room, the atmosphere was tense. Machines beeped rapidly, nurses called out instructions, and sweat glistened on Sophia's forehead. She closed her eyes, imagining her children's tiny faces, clinging to the hope that they would live. "Push, Sophia, push!" the doctor commanded. Her screams echoed down the hallway, raw and filled with both agony and determination. She pushed with every ounce of strength she had left, her nails digging into the sheets, her heart pounding like a war drum. Minutes felt like hours. The air was thick with urgency. Then suddenly the first cry pierced the room, a fragile, beautiful sound. A baby boy. Tears flooded Sophia's eyes, but she had no time to rest. Another contraction came, fiercer than the last. She bore down again, her body trembling violently. Another cry filled the air. A baby girl, her vision blurred, her chest heaving, but she knew there was one more life inside her. She whispered hoarsely, "Please. Please let my last baby survive." The room grew quiet, the tension suffocating. The doctor worked feverishly, sweat dripping from his brow. Sophia's grip loosened as exhaustion overtook her. The nurses' voices grew distant. And just as her eyes fluttered closed, the room fell silent. Was the third baby alive, or had Sophia given her all in vain? Across town, in a lavish apartment decorated with gold accents and crystal chandeliers, Clara lounged on a velvet sofa. A glass of red wine swirled between her fingers as she admired her reflection in the tall mirror. She had everything she wanted: beauty, charm, and now the attention of a married man who was too weak to resist her. Her phone lit up, and she smirked. David had just texted her, "On my way." She leaned back, satisfied. For Clara, tonight wasn't about love, it was about power. She wanted to make sure David's loyalty belonged to her and her alone, even if it meant destroying the life of his wife and unborn children. When David arrived, slightly flushed from rushing, Clara rose gracefully and slipped her arms around his neck. The scent of expensive perfume filled the air. "You're here," she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. "I thought for a moment you'd actually go running to that wife of yours." David's jaw tightened, guilt flickering across his eyes for just a second. "Sophia will be fine. She always is. She's strong." Clara pulled back, tilting her head with a sly smile. "Strong? She's nothing without you. Don't you see? I'm the one who understands you, the one who can give you the life you deserve." Her words were like poison wrapped in honey. David wanted to argue, but instead, he let himself sink deeper into her embrace. With each kiss, each whispered promise, he drowned out the memory of Sophia struggling alone at home. The night unfolded with laughter, music, and luxury. Clara poured more wine, feeding David sweet lies about the future they could build together. She spoke of traveling the world, of owning businesses, of leaving the past behind. "You don't need the weight of responsibility dragging you down," Clara cooed. "Imagine a life with me, where it's just us, free, untouchable." David closed his eyes, choosing to believe her. He convinced himself Sophia would understand, that she would forgive him, that tonight's choice was harmless. But deep down, he knew he was betraying not just his wife, but the 3 innocent lives about to enter the world without a father by their side. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sophia's cries of pain echoed down sterile halls. Each scream could have shattered David's heart if he had been there to hear it. But he wasn't. He was clinking glasses with Clara, ignoring the phone that buzzed in his pocket. Sophia's number flashed again and again on his screen, but David silenced it without a second thought. Clara noticed and laughed lightly, pressing her lips against his cheek. "Let her cry," Clara murmured. "Tonight, you're mine." The words sealed his choice. David slipped further into the trap, blinded by desire, deaf to duty. He had no idea that with every ignored call, every careless laugh, he was carving the path toward his own downfall. But just as David lost himself in Clara's arms, a knock at the door shattered the illusion. Who could possibly be looking for him at this hour? The knock on the apartment door startled David. He froze, the glass of wine halfway to his lips. Clara arched an eyebrow, her lips curling into a playful smile. "Are you expecting someone?" she teased, brushing her fingers along his arm. David shook his head quickly. "No, nobody knows I'm here." His voice carried a nervous edge. The knock came again, louder this time. Reluctantly, David stood and opened the door. A delivery boy handed him a small envelope and hurried off into the night. Confused, David tore it open. Inside was a simple note written in hurried handwriting. "Your wife is in labor. She needs you. Come now." David's hands trembled. His heart raced as guilt surged through him. Sophia was giving birth. His wife, his children, his family. For a brief moment, he imagined rushing to the hospital, holding her hand, and finally doing what was right. But Clara noticed the conflict in his eyes. She glided over, snatched the note from his hand, and read it aloud with mocking laughter. Labor? Oh, poor little Sophia, crying all alone. David, don't you see? This is exactly why you shouldn't go. She'll survive without you. She always does. But me? Clara's voice softened into a seductive whisper. I won't forgive you if you leave me tonight. Her words slithered into his heart, suffocating the faint spark of conscience. Clara pressed closer, her perfume enveloping him, her eyes demanding his loyalty. David's pulse quickened, not with love, but with fear of losing the woman who had ensnared him. She'll understand, he muttered weakly, convincing himself of a lie. Sophia's strong. She'll be fine. Clara smiled triumphantly and led him back inside, shutting the door on the outside world. With that one decision, David turned his back on the woman who had given him everything. At that very moment, across town, Sophia's body writhed in unbearable pain. Her screams filled the delivery room, her hands clawing at the sheets as she begged for strength. She glanced toward the empty space where her husband should have been, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. David? Please, I need you, she whispered through sobs. But her plea was swallowed by the sterile silence. The doctor barked orders, the nurses worked frantically, but none of them could replace the warmth of the man who had promised to stand beside her forever. Sophia felt abandoned, discarded like she meant nothing. And still she fought, not for herself, but for the 3 tiny lives depending on her. Meanwhile, David raised his glass again, lost in Clara's charms. He convinced himself he had made the right choice, that he deserved this freedom, this luxury. He silenced the last pangs of guilt with another swallow of wine, sealing his betrayal. But destiny has a way of recording every cruelty. Every tear Sophia shed, every scream of pain he ignored, was etching his punishment into the future. And just as Sophia's final push came, her body shaking violently, a sudden complication threatened to take everything away. Would she survive, or would David's betrayal cost him more than he ever imagined? While David drowned himself in Clara's sweet lies, life and death wrestled with Sophia inside the hospital room. Her cries pierced the sterile walls, her breath shallow, her strength slipping away. Every second felt like eternity. Every contraction a battle between survival and surrender. In the chaos of that night, a familiar face appeared. Mrs. Green, Sophia's elderly neighbor. She had lived next door for decades, a widow with silver hair and kind eyes. She had watched Sophia grow from a young bride into a devoted wife, and she had noticed the loneliness that lingered in Sophia's gaze long before anyone else cared to see it. When she heard that Sophia had gone into labor, Mrs. Green did not hesitate. She hurried to the hospital, clutching her worn shawl around her shoulders, her heart pounding with worry. As she stepped into the waiting area, she saw Sophia's phone lying on the counter. Screen cracked, messages unanswered. David's name was nowhere to be found. "Where's her husband?" Mrs. Green asked a nurse breathlessly. The nurse's eyes dropped to the floor. He isn't here." Mrs. Green's heart sank. Anger and sorrow mingled in her chest. She whispered under her breath, "How could he leave her now? That selfish man." Without wasting another second, she pushed into the delivery room. There lay Sophia, drenched in sweat, her body trembling, her hands desperately reaching out for someone, anyone, to hold. "Mrs. Green?" Sophia gasped weakly, tears blurring her vision. I can't do this alone." The older woman rushed to her side, gripping her hand tightly. "You're not alone, sweetheart. I'm here. I won't let you go through this without someone who loves you." Sophia's tears spilled freely. That touch, that simple reassurance, was the anchor she needed to keep fighting. The doctor gave Mrs. Green a quick nod, recognizing that her presence might be the very thing keeping Sophia from giving up. "Push, Sophia, push," the doctor urged again. Sophia screamed, her body arching in agony. Mrs. Green whispered in her ear, "For your baby's child. Do it for them. They need you. You're stronger than you think." And with that, Sophia gathered every last drop of strength. Another cry filled the room. The second baby, alive but frail, was placed gently into the nurse's arms. Mrs. Green's hand never left hers. She wiped Sophia's tears with the corner of her shawl, whispering prayers under her breath. "Stay with me, Sophia. Don't you dare give up now." The third baby was still fighting to be born. The doctor's face tightened with worry. The room grew tense again. Sophia's chest rose and fell unevenly, exhaustion stealing her breath. Mrs. Green leaned closer, her voice steady and fierce. "Listen to me, Sophia. Your children will grow up strong, but only if you're here to raise them. Hold on, don't let David's betrayal be the end of you. Sophia's eyes fluttered, her lips trembling. She drew in one more ragged breath, summoning courage. And just as the doctor prepared for the final push, a sudden alarm from the monitor blared. Something was terribly wrong with Sophia's heart. The piercing sound of the heart monitor filled the room, turning every breath into terror. Nurses scrambled, voices overlapping in panic. Her heart rate is dropping. We're losing her. Sophia's vision blurred as the world around her spun into chaos. The ceiling lights above seemed to flicker, distant and cold. Her chest burned, each breath shallow, like air was slipping away no matter how desperately she tried to hold on. Mrs. Green tightened her grip on Sophia's hand. "Stay with us, child. Don't you dare close those eyes." Her voice trembled, but her determination was unshakable. The doctor barked orders. "Get me more oxygen, now. We have to stabilize her before we lose both mother and child." Sophia felt her body weaken, her strength draining faster than she could fight. In her haze, she saw flickering images, David smiling on their wedding day, the vows he had whispered, the promises he had broken. And then she saw the faces of her babies, tiny and fragile, waiting for her. "No," she whispered faintly, "I can't leave them, not now." The doctor leaned close, urgency in his voice. "Sophia, listen to me. One last push, one more. Your child's life depends on it, and so does yours." Sophia's body trembled violently. Her pulse slowed, her lips turned pale. The machines beeped frantically, marking the edge of life and death. Mrs. Green's eyes welled with tears, but she leaned in close, her voice steady. "Think of your babies, Sophia. Think of their little hands, their little cries. They need their mother. You're all they have." The words pierced through the fog of pain. Sophia gritted her teeth, gathering every last fragment of strength buried deep within her soul. With a cry that shook the room, she pushed, pouring her life into that one final effort. A silence fell. The air grew still, every pair of eyes locked on the doctor. Then a fragile cry broke through the silence. The third baby was alive. Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks, her body collapsing against the bed in sheer exhaustion. The doctor handed the newborn to the nurse, relief washing over his face. "We've got all three. They're premature but alive." Mrs. Green sobbed quietly, whispering, "You did it, child. You did it." She brushed Sophia's damp hair back, pride shining in her eyes. But the victory was fragile. Sophia's body went limp, her eyes closing despite her struggle to stay awake. The monitor screamed again, louder, sharper. Her blood pressure plummeted. "Her heart's failing," a nurse shouted. "We're losing her again." The doctor immediately moved into action. "Prepare for emergency intervention. We cannot let her slip away." Sophia's mind drifted in and out of consciousness. She saw shadows, heard muffled voices, felt the tug of hands working to save her. In her fading thoughts, she prayed, "Please, God, let me live long enough to see them grow. Don't let them be motherless." Mrs. Green pressed her forehead against Sophia's hand, whispering broken prayers. "Don't leave them, Sophia. Don't leave us. Fight." The room buzzed with urgency, nurses moving in a blur, the doctor's voice sharp and commanding. And just as the team prepared for a drastic measure to restart her heart, the monitor flatlined. The line went still. The shrill, continuous beep of the flatline filled the room like a death sentence. For a moment, everyone froze, the weight of despair pressing down. But then Dr. James, the attending physician, snapped into action. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Chest compressions. Now, don't you give up on me, Sophia. Not tonight." A nurse jumped into position, pumping rhythmically on Sophia's chest, while another prepared the crash cart. The smell of antiseptic mixed with fear as every second dragged like an eternity. Mrs. Green clutched her shawl with trembling hands, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. She whispered prayers under her breath, begging heaven not to take Sophia away. Dr. James grabbed the paddles of the defibrillator. His jaw was set, his eyes burning with determination. "Charge to 200. Clear." A jolt of electricity surged through Sophia's fragile body, lifting her slightly off the bed. The monitor flickered, then returned to silence. Again, James barked. "Charge to 300. Clear." Another shock. Sophia's body convulsed. Still nothing. Mrs. Green cried out, "Don't stop! Please, don't let her die!" Dr. James looked at Sophia's pale face, her lips drained of color, her body limp. For a brief second, even he felt the crushing weight of failure. But then he remembered the newborns, their tiny cries echoing faintly in the background. 3 innocent lives had just entered the world. They needed their mother. "Come on, Sophia," he muttered fiercely, sweat dripping from his brow. "Your children are waiting. Don't you dare leave them now." He positioned the paddles again. Charge to 360. Clear. A third shock rippled through her body. The monitor stuttered, the line trembled, then suddenly a faint beep broke the silence. One beep, then another. Her heart was beating again. Relief flooded the room. Nurses sighed. Some even whispered thank yous to God. Mrs. Green collapsed into a chair, her tears now tears of joy. "She's back," the nurse announced, her voice shaky with relief. Dr. James didn't allow himself to celebrate yet. "Stabilize her, keep the oxygen steady, we're not out of danger." Sophia's eyelids fluttered weakly. Her breaths were shallow, but life had returned. She whispered something, her voice faint, almost lost beneath the machines. Mrs. Green leaned closer, clutching her hand. "What is it, child? Are they alive?" Sophia's cracked lips barely formed the words. Mrs. Green smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, all 3. They're alive. They're waiting for you." A weak smile curved Sophia's lips, but exhaustion dragged her back under. Her body surrendered to unconsciousness, trusting the hands around her to keep her safe. Dr. James straightened, his expression both proud and grim. He had pulled her back from the brink, but he knew the battle was far from over. Premature babies meant long nights ahead, and Sophia's body was still fragile. The fight for survival had only just begun. As Sophia lay unconscious, her babies whisked to intensive care, James looked toward Mrs. Green. His voice was low, resolute. "She survived tonight, but she'll need more than medicine. She'll need people who truly stand by her, because her husband clearly won't." And as those words left his mouth, David's shadow loomed larger, completely unaware that the choice he had made tonight would soon destroy the life he thought he controlled. While Sophia lay unconscious, her fragile body clinging to life and her newborns fighting in incubators, David's night unfolded in a completely different world. Across town, in Clara's lavish apartment, the air buzzed with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. David sat comfortably on the velvet couch, a glass of champagne in his hand. Clara curled against him like a queen beside her king. The lights from the city skyline glittered through the tall windows, reflecting a life of luxury that David convinced himself he deserved. "To us," Clara toasted, raising her glass. "To a future where nothing and no one can stand in our way." David smirked, clinking his glass against hers. "To us," he repeated, his voice thick with alcohol and desire. As the night wore on, Clara leaned closer, her voice dripping with seduction. "David, you've spent too many years weighed down by responsibility. A weak wife, children you never asked for. You're better than that. With me, you'll finally be free." Her words stroked his ego, drowning the faint whispers of guilt that tried to creep in. David laughed, throwing his head back. "You're right. Sophia will manage. She always does. She's stronger than she looks." Clara smiled knowingly, though her eyes gleamed with calculation. She wasn't in love with David. She was in love with what he could give her: money, status, security. Every word she spoke was carefully chosen to keep him hooked, blind to the truth. Meanwhile, Sophia's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with the hospital's number, desperate calls for David to come. He glanced at it, frowning, but Clara quickly snatched the phone and pressed ignore. "Don't ruin tonight with her drama," she whispered, pressing her lips against his. "This is our time." David hesitated for a second, but then he let the phone go dark. He leaned back, convincing himself it was the right choice. After all, wasn't Clara right? Hadn't he earned this freedom? Music swelled in the background. Clara danced in the center of the room, her red dress swirling as she pulled David to his feet. They twirled, laughed, and kissed as though nothing else in the world existed. But beneath all the glamour, a shadow loomed. Every ignored call, every sip of champagne, every stolen kiss was a nail in the coffin of his marriage. While he celebrated with Clara, his wife nearly died, bringing his children into the world. And though he didn't know it yet, the price of his betrayal was already circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Clara pressed herself against him, her smile wicked. "David, forget the past. Sophia is nothing but a chain. You and I, we're unstoppable." David closed his eyes, surrendering to her words, unaware of how fragile his world truly was. But just as the night reached its peak, Clara's phone rang, and the name flashing on the screen was one that could unravel everything. Clara's phone buzzed loudly on the table, breaking the spell of music and laughter. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It wasn't a friend or a business contact. It was the hospital. "Strange," she muttered, her red lips curling slightly. "Why would they call me?" David stiffened, his hand tightening around his glass. He knew immediately what it meant. His chest grew heavy, guilt seeping in like smoke filling a room. "Sophia," he whispered under his breath. Clara caught it and rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you're going soft on me now." David reached for the phone, but Clara snatched it back, silencing the call with a swipe of her manicured finger. "Listen to me," she said firmly, pressing her body against his. "You run to her, and everything we've built tonight collapses. Do you really want to go back to being her prisoner?" David hesitated. His mind replayed the moment they first married. Sophia's shy smile, her trembling hands holding his as she whispered her vows. For a fleeting second, he felt the sting of shame. His children were being born at this very moment, and he was sitting here, drunk and careless. Clara saw the hesitation and tightened her grip on his arm. "David, wake up. That woman will drain you with responsibility. Crying babies, sleepless nights, endless demands. You'll drown. But with me, you'll rise. You'll have the life you always dreamed of." Her words were sharp, cutting away at the fragile thread of conscience left inside him. David looked at the dark screen of Clara's phone. The call had ended. The chance to do the right thing slipped away with it. "Another glass?" Clara purred, pouring more champagne. David swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, you're right. Sophia will manage." He raised his glass once more, trying to drown his guilt in bubbles and lies. Clara kissed his cheek, victorious, her eyes gleaming like a predator who had claimed her prey. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, chaos still reigned. Sophia lay unconscious, her body weak but alive, her babies fighting in their tiny incubators. Nurses moved quickly, adjusting wires and tubes, while Dr. James monitored their fragile breathing. "She needs him," Mrs. Green whispered, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. "She needs her husband to walk through that door." But the door remained closed. The man who should have been there was laughing in another woman's arms, sipping champagne, pretending his world was perfect. The night dragged on. Sophia's children cried softly, their tiny voices a chorus of survival. Mrs. Green sat at her bedside, whispering comfort that David never gave. Dr. James checked her vitals, silently vowing he wouldn't let her die. Not after all she had endured alone. And still, David ignored the truth. He convinced himself he had chosen wisely, that he was free. But fate has a way of knocking twice, and when the hospital reached out again, this time the news was something David could not ignore. The sun crept slowly through the hospital windows, painting the room with pale light. After a night that had nearly stolen her life, Sophia finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy and clouded, and for a moment she struggled to understand where she was. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled her nose, and the steady beeping of machines reminded her she was still alive. Her lips trembled as she whispered, My babies." Dr. James appeared at her bedside, his face soft but serious. "They're alive, Sophia. All three of them. They're small, fragile, but they're fighters, just like their mother." Tears blurred her vision. Relief washed over her, mingled with exhaustion and heartbreak. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Mrs. Green quickly leaned forward, supporting her gently. "You rest, sweetheart," the older woman said tenderly. "Your strength saved them. Now let us take care of you." Sophia's heart ached. "Where is David?" she asked, her voice cracking. Her eyes searched the room, desperate for the man she still hoped would appear. Mrs. Green hesitated, her face tightening. She didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that David had chosen another woman over his own family. Instead, she squeezed Sophia's hand. "He's not here right now, but you don't need him. You have us." The words cut deep. Not here. Not even for the birth of his own children. A sob caught in Sophia's throat, but she forced herself to stay strong. She would not let her babies see her broken. Moments later, the nurse rolled in 3 small incubators. The room grew still, almost sacred, as the fragile cries of the newborns filled the air. Sophia's tears spilled freely as the nurse carefully placed one of the tiny infants in her arms. Her body shook as she gazed down at the little face, so small, so perfect. "My son," she whispered, pressing her lips to his forehead. "You survived. You all survived." The second baby was brought to her next, then the third. Her arms trembled, but she pulled them close, cradling all three, as though she could shield them from the cruelty of the world. Mrs. Green wiped her own tears. "Look at them, child. They're your legacy. They're your reason to keep fighting." Sophia kissed each one, her heart overflowing with love and sorrow. She whispered promises through her tears. "I will never leave you. I will protect you, even if I must do it alone." Dr. James watched silently, his chest heavy with both admiration and pity. He had witnessed countless births, but none as tragic as this, a mother abandoned on the very night she gave life. Sophia looked toward the door one last time, hoping, praying David might walk in. But the doorway remained empty. Her tears fell onto her children's blankets as reality settled like stone in her chest. She was a wife in name only, a mother abandoned. And while she held her babies in lonely triumph, David was making a choice across town that would shatter her heart even more. Morning sunlight spilled into Clara's apartment, bouncing off the golden frames and marble floors. David sat slouched on the couch, nursing a headache from too much champagne. Clara, however, was wide awake, pacing the room with her phone in hand. She had answered one of the hospital's calls earlier, pretending to be concerned. Her voice had dripped with false sweetness as she asked, "Oh dear, how is Sophia? Is everything all right?" The nurse on the other end had explained that Sophia had survived a complicated birth and that the babies were alive but fragile. Clara had feigned relief, her lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. Now she turned to David, who rubbed his temples. "Good news," she said smoothly. "Sophia and the babies survived." David exhaled in relief, though guilt gnawed at him. "Thank God," I thought. Clara cut him off sharply. "Don't look so dramatic. You knew she would be fine. She's strong, remember?" He looked at her uneasily. "I should go see her. She needs me." Clara's laughter sliced through his words. "Needs you? David, don't be ridiculous. She's surrounded by doctors and nurses. What could you possibly add? Standing awkwardly by her bed while she cries? That's not what you want." David frowned, torn. "But they're my children." Clara moved closer, cupping his face in her hands. Her tone softened, her eyes glowing with practiced affection. "Listen to me. Those children will tie you down, drain you, make you miserable. Do you really want to spend your life trapped in that cycle? Or do you want to build a future with me? Power, freedom, everything you've ever wanted." Her words were sweet poison. David closed his eyes, letting her sway him. Clara kissed him softly, sealing the thought. But deep down, she was plotting. She knew that as long as Sophia and the babies existed, David's heart might waver, and Clara had no intention of sharing. Later that day, Clara insisted on accompanying David to the hospital, just to check. She dressed elegantly, her heels clicking on the sterile floors as if she owned the place. Nurses glanced at her curiously while Sophia lay pale and weak in her bed, cradling her children with Mrs. Green by her side. When Clara entered, she plastered on a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Sophia, darling, you poor thing, what an ordeal you've been through." Sophia's tired eyes flickered up. Her arms tightened around her babies instinctively. She sensed the falsehood dripping from every word. "Why are you here?" she asked hoarsely. Clara tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Because I care. I wanted to make sure you were all right." Mrs. Green narrowed her eyes, seeing straight through the act. But Sophia, too weak to argue, said nothing. Clara leaned closer to David, whispering just loud enough for Sophia to hear. "You can't let this drag you down. You have a life beyond this. Responsibility." Sophia's heart shattered, her tears falling silently as she realized Clara's real purpose. And in that moment, Sophia knew Clara wasn't here to comfort her. She was here to erase her. The hospital room was heavy with silence after Clara's cutting words. Sophia lay weak in bed, clutching her babies protectively. Her pale face was wet with tears, but her eyes burned with quiet defiance. She would not let Clara's poison take away the only joy she had left. David stood awkwardly between them, shifting uncomfortably. His gaze darted from his fragile wife to the woman who now had him under her spell. He opened his mouth, but Clara spoke first. "David," she said sweetly, her voice laced with hidden venom, "you need to be honest, with yourself and with her. Stop pretending you're the man she thinks you are. Sophia's voice cracked as she whispered, David, our children. They need their father. I need you. David swallowed hard. Guilt clawed at him, but Clara's hand slid into his, squeezing firmly. Tell her, Clara urged softly, yet firmly enough to remind him who controlled him now. David's shoulders slumped. He couldn't meet Sophia's eyes. I can't do this, Sophia. I'm not ready to be a father to 3 babies. This isn't the life I wanted. The words pierced Sophia's heart like a blade. She gasped, clutching her children tighter as if shielding them from their own father's rejection. Her voice shook. Not ready, David? You made vows. To me, to them. You're their father. But David only shook his head, looking more like a coward than a man. I'm sorry. I never asked for this. You're strong, Sophia. You'll manage on your own. Clara's lips curved into a victorious smile as she stroked his arm, pretending to console him. You're doing the right thing, David. Don't let guilt trap you. You deserve happiness, not chains. Mrs. Green, who had been silent until now, rose from her chair, her eyes blazing. Shame on you, David. This woman nearly died bringing your children into the world, and you stand here with another woman, denying your own flesh and blood? David flinched but said nothing. Clara stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mrs. Green, please, don't make this harder. We all know Sophia is strong enough to raise them without him. He'll only be in the way. Sophia's tears fell freely. Every word felt like salt in her wounds. Her body trembled, but she lifted her head, her voice breaking. If you walk away now, David, you're not just abandoning me, you're abandoning them. And one day, they'll know what you chose. For a flicker of a moment, doubt crossed David's face. But Clara's grip tightened, pulling him back into her orbit. Don't listen to her guilt, she whispered. Think about us, David. Think about the future you want. David turned away, unable to face his wife's broken gaze. His silence was louder than any words. Sophia buried her face into her baby's blankets, her sobs muffled but heartbreaking. Mrs. Green wrapped an arm around her, whispering, He'll pay for this, child. One day he'll pay. And as David walked out of the room, leaving Sophia behind, Clara's triumphant smile revealed her darkest intention, erasing Sophia completely from his life. Days passed in the hospital, each one blending into the next. Sophia grew a little stronger physically, but her heart remained shattered. She spent hours by her baby's incubators, whispering lullabies through her tears, promising them a future no matter how abandoned she felt. But Clara was not done. One afternoon, when the hallway was quiet and Mrs. Green had stepped away to bring Sophia some food, Clara entered the hospital room alone. She carried a bouquet of flowers, her heels clicking against the tile floor, her expression dripping with false concern. Sophia, Clara said smoothly, placing the flowers on the nightstand. How are you feeling, dear? Sophia stiffened, her eyes narrowing. Why are you here again? Clara gave a mock sigh, lowering herself into the chair beside the bed. Because I care. You've been through so much. I thought you might need a friend. The words twisted Sophia's stomach. A friend? She repeated bitterly. You stole my husband, and you dare to call yourself a friend? Clara tilted her head, her smile never wavering. I didn't steal anything. David came to me willingly. Maybe that should tell you something. Sophia's hands trembled as she clutched her baby's blankets tighter. Pain surged through her, but so did anger. You'll never replace me. No matter what lies you tell him, I am his wife, and these are his children. Clara leaned forward, her eyes sharp as glass. And what good has that done you? Look at you, lying weak in a hospital bed, raising 3 babies alone. David doesn't want this life. He doesn't want you. He wants freedom. He wants me. Sophia's throat tightened. Every word was a dagger, but she refused to let Clara see her break. If he truly wanted you, he wouldn't still wear his wedding ring. For the first time, Clara's mask slipped. Her smile faltered just slightly. Then she laughed softly, regaining her composure. Rings can be removed, vows can be broken. It's only a matter of time before he leaves you completely. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. I may be weak now, but my children will grow strong, and one day they'll see who stood by them and who walked away. Clara's expression hardened. You think you're noble, Sophia, but you're just pathetic. Do you really believe you can raise 3 children alone? You'll collapse under the weight, and when you do, David will already be mine. The air between them crackled with tension. Sophia's chest rose and fell rapidly, anger fueling her fragile strength. You may have his attention now, Clara, but hearts have a way of revealing truth. Lies don't last forever. Clara stood, adjusting her coat with elegance. She leaned closer, whispering in Sophia's ear. We'll see about that. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts, because soon I'll make sure you disappear completely. And as Clara swept out of the room, Sophia felt a chill crawl down her spine. Clara's words weren't just threats. They were a promise of war. Clara left the hospital that day with her mind buzzing like a hornet's nest. Sophia's defiance had struck a nerve, and Clara wasn't about to let it go. She knew David was weak, easy to manipulate, but as long as Sophia remained a presence in his life, there would always be a risk. Clara needed to cut Sophia out completely, not just from David's heart, but from his respect and reputation. Her plan was simple but cruel. Poison David against Sophia with lies. That evening, Clara poured 2 glasses of wine and sat beside David in his apartment. He looked tired, conflicted, as though the weight of what he had done lingered at the edge of his conscience. Clara slid closer, resting her head on his shoulder. You've been quiet all day, she purred. What's on your mind? David sighed heavily. I went to see the babies earlier. They're so small, Clara. And Sophia, she looks so fragile. I don't know if I did the right thing walking away. Clara's smile froze, but only for a moment. She quickly disguised it with a tender look. Oh, darling, I understand, but you need to know the truth about Sophia. David turned, frowning. What do you mean? Clara's voice dropped into a careful whisper, dripping with fabricated concern. She's been saying things about you, David. Hurtful things. The nurses told me she blames you for everything. She says you abandoned her, that you don't care if the babies live or die. She's turning everyone against you. David's eyes widened. She said that? Clara nodded gravely, brushing his arm as though comforting him. She's painting herself as the sainted mother and you as the villain. If you're not careful, David, your reputation could be destroyed. Do you really want your children growing up thinking their father was a coward? Her words sank deep, planting seeds of doubt and resentment. David clenched his jaw. I gave her everything, a home, security, and now she wants to make me the enemy? Clara hid her satisfaction behind a mask of sorrow. I hate to tell you these things, but I can't let you be blindsided. You deserve loyalty. You deserve love. David's heart hardened a little more that night. The guilt that once pricked at him dulled under Clara's poisonous lies. Slowly, he began to see Sophia not as the woman he had abandoned, but as a threat to his freedom. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Sophia fought silently against exhaustion and despair. She had no idea that Clara was weaving webs of deceit behind her back. She only knew the man she loved seemed colder every day. His visits shorter, his words sharper. Green noticed it too. That woman is filling his ears with poison, she muttered. Mark my words, Sophia, she's up to no good. Sophia stroked her baby's soft hair, whispering, no matter what lies she spreads, I'll never stop fighting for them. But Clara wasn't done. She had one more scheme in mind, a plan so cruel it could destroy Sophia's reputation forever. The hospital corridors whispered with rumors. Nurses exchanged quiet glances, some pitying Sophia, others confused by the icy attitude David had begun to show. Clara's lies had started to spread like wildfire, tainting the air around Sophia's name. She felt the weight of it every time she caught a nurse looking at her with sympathy tinged by judgment. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in her room feeding her babies, David arrived with Clara trailing behind him like a shadow. His words were clipped, his tone cold. Sophia, I've heard things. People say you've been talking about me, blaming me. Sophia's eyes widened, her voice breaking. David, I never. But Clara cut her off smoothly. David, don't let her manipulate you. She's always playing the victim. She wants everyone to think you're the bad guy. Sophia's chest tightened. Her tears threatened to spill, but she held them back, refusing to give Clara the satisfaction. I almost died bringing these children into the world, she whispered fiercely. The only thing I've said is the truth. You weren't there. The tension in the room thickened until the door swung open. Dr. James entered, his sharp eyes immediately scanning the scene. He could feel the hostility, the false sweetness dripping from Clara's voice. Mr. and Mrs. Harris, he greeted, his tone firm. Then his gaze locked on Clara. And you again. What business do you have in this hospital room? Clara smirked, tilting her head. I'm only here to support David. Someone has to stand by him while his wife spreads lies. Dr. James's eyes hardened. He stepped forward, his presence commanding. Enough. I've been here since the moment Sophia came through those doors. I watched her fight for her life. I shocked her heart back into beating when it stopped, and I watched her hold on to 3 premature infants with nothing but sheer will. If anyone dares say she's lying, they'll answer to me. Sophia blinked, stunned by his sudden defense. David shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his face. Clara, however, bristled, her false charm slipping for the first time. Doctor, she said sharply, you don't understand the situation. James cut her off. I understand plenty. I understand that this woman was abandoned by her husband during the most dangerous night of her life. I understand that she nearly died alone, except for the help of Mrs. Green and my team. And I understand that you, miss, have no right to interfere in her recovery. The room fell silent. Sophia's heart pounded as gratitude and relief flooded her chest. For the first time, someone had spoken the truth aloud, unshaken by Clara's games. Clara forced a laugh, but her eyes flashed with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. David, don't let him twist this. But David said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. Dr. James turned to Sophia, his voice gentler now. Don't let their words break you. You're stronger than both of them combined. Clara's smile returned, but this time it was darker. Dr. James had just made himself her next target. For a brief moment, Sophia felt relief after Dr. James spoke up for her. His words had cut through the lies, giving her strength to hold her head a little higher. But peace never stayed long. That night, as the hospital grew quiet and the halls dimmed, a sudden alarm shattered the fragile calm. The sharp, urgent beeping came from the neonatal intensive care unit where Sophia's babies lay in their incubators. Nurses rushed past her door, their faces tight with worry. Sophia's heart leapt into her throat. She tried to rise from bed, but her body was still too weak. Mrs. Green hurried in, her face pale. Sophia, it's the babies. Something's wrong. Sophia's world tilted. She clutched the edge of her bed, her voice breaking. No. Please, no. Dr. James appeared moments later, his calm but urgent stride filling the room with authority. 2 of the infants are having breathing difficulties. They're too weak to maintain oxygen levels on their own. We're doing everything we can. Sophia's tears spilled uncontrollably. Please, let me see them. They need their mother. The nurses hesitated, but James nodded. Bring her in. Carefully. Leaning heavily on Mrs. Green, Sophia shuffled into the NICU, her heart breaking at the sight before her. Her tiny children, so fragile, lay surrounded by tubes and monitors, their little chests rising and falling unevenly. The machines beeped frantically, marking every struggle. Sophia pressed her trembling hand against the glass of the incubator. My babies. Stay with me. Don't leave me. I can't lose you. Her voice cracked, and her tears fell freely, leaving wet streaks on the glass. The sight was almost unbearable. One woman, abandoned by her husband, begging the universe to spare the only treasures she had left. Dr. James adjusted the oxygen settings, barking quick instructions to the nurses. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp and precise, but even he knew that for premature infants, the line between life and death was razor thin. Sophia's sobs filled the room. She whispered prayers through trembling lips, promising anything, everything, if only her children would survive. Mrs. Green stood beside her, stroking her shoulder. Hold on, child. Don't lose hope. They're fighters, just like you. Meanwhile, across town, David sat at a candlelit dinner with Clara, blissfully unaware of the crisis. He raised his glass, laughing at her shallow jokes, ignoring once again the phone buzzing in his pocket. Back in the NICU, the nurses worked feverishly. One baby's breathing steadied slightly, but the other's monitor continued to scream. Sophia's knees buckled as she pressed harder against the glass, her voice breaking into a desperate cry. Fight, my love. Please fight. Don't leave me. Dr. James glanced at her, determination blazing in his eyes. Sophia, talk to them. They need to hear you. Your voice could make the difference. With shaking breath, Sophia leaned close, whispering through her tears. Mama's here. I'll never leave you. Please, stay with me. And in that fragile silence, the baby's chest suddenly stilled. The monitor's piercing alarm flatlined. The shrill alarm of the flatline sent terror through the NICU. Nurses rushed to the struggling infant, their hands moving swiftly, attaching new tubes, increasing oxygen. Dr. James barked orders, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Start resuscitation. Don't stop until we bring this baby back." Sophia's body trembled as she watched, her knuckles white against the glass. Her legs threatened to give out, but Mrs. Green held her upright. "Stay strong, child," she whispered fiercely. "Your baby needs you to believe." Sophia pressed her forehead against the incubator, her tears soaking the glass. "Please, my sweet one. Don't leave me. I'll protect you. I'll love you every day of your life. Just stay with me." Dr. James worked tirelessly. Seconds stretched like hours until, finally, a weak but steady cry broke through the chaos. Relief crashed over the room. The monitor beeped back to life. Sophia collapsed into Mrs. Green's arms, sobbing with gratitude. Thank you, God." But her relief was short-lived. Across town, David sat in a luxury restaurant with Clara. His phone buzzed again and again, the hospital's number flashing like a warning. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing, but Clara noticed and quickly covered his hand with hers. "Don't answer," she said smoothly. "It's just more drama. Tonight is about us." David hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "But what if something's wrong? The babies." Clara leaned closer, her voice sharp but coated in sweetness. "If you keep letting her pull you back, you'll never be free. Think, David. Do you want to spend your life trapped in that hospital room, surrounded by crying infants and a weak wife? Or do you want this? Freedom, love, success." Her words dripped into his ears like venom. David swallowed hard, torn between conscience and temptation. He pictured Sophia, pale and fragile, holding their children. But then he looked at Clara, dazzling and seductive, promising him a life without burden. Slowly, he slipped his phone back into his pocket. "You're right," he muttered. "Sophia can handle it. She always does." Clara's lips curved into a satisfied smile. She leaned in, whispering, "That's my David." Back at the hospital, Sophia held her babies, her body still shaking from the scare. She looked toward the door, hoping, praying, that David would walk through, that for once he would choose his family. But the doorway remained empty, the silence louder than any rejection. Dr. James watched her, anger burning beneath his calm exterior. "He should be here," he said quietly to Mrs. Green. "A father should never abandon his children." Mrs. Green's eyes hardened. "Mark my words, his choices will destroy him." Sophia kissed her babies' foreheads, her tears falling on their soft skin. She whispered, "Even if your father isn't here, I'll never leave you. You're my everything." And at that very moment, Clara raised her glass to David, toasting their future, unaware that her cruel victory was already planting the seeds of her downfall. For weeks, Clara kept David wrapped tightly in her grasp. She showered him with attention, whispered sweet promises, and painted Sophia as nothing more than a burden. But the cracks in her mask were beginning to show. One evening, Clara sat across from David in her apartment, sipping wine while he scrolled through bills and account statements on his laptop, his brow furrowed. "Clara, do you realize how much money we've been spending? The restaurants, the clothes, the trips. It's draining everything I've saved." Clara's eyes flashed, but she quickly replaced the glare with a sugary smile. "David, darling, why worry about pennies when we're building a life of abundance? You're successful. You'll earn more. Besides, don't you want me to look my best by your side?" David sighed. "It's not pennies. These are serious expenses. And meanwhile, Sophia is raising 3 babies alone. The hospital bills." Clara slammed her glass down, shattering the illusion of calm. "Enough about Sophia. Why must you always bring her up? She's your past. I am your future." Her sudden outburst startled David. For the first time, he saw the sharpness in her eyes, the hunger beneath the charm. "Clara, what exactly do you want from me?" She leaned forward, her voice low, almost menacing. "I want you to cut her off completely. No more visits, no more money, no more guilt. Every time you look back, you weaken us. If you truly love me, prove it. Sever all ties with her and those children." David recoiled. "They're my children." Clara's laugh was cold. "Children you never asked for. Dead weight that will drag you down your entire life. Do you think you can build an empire while paying for 3 mouths you never wanted? Be honest, David. You wanted freedom, and I gave it to you." The room went silent. David stared at her, doubt creeping in. For weeks, Clara's words had guided his every move, But now her intentions rang louder than her seduction. She didn't love him. She loved what he could give her. Back at the hospital, Sophia rocked her babies gently, humming through her exhaustion. She had no idea Clara was working to erase them completely from David's life. Yet, she felt it in her bones. The darkness surrounding Clara was not ordinary jealousy. It was something more dangerous. Mrs. Green noticed Sophia's faraway look. "What troubles you, child?" Sophia shook her head softly. "It's Clara. I don't trust her. She wants to destroy everything I have left." Dr. James, entering with charts in hand, overheard. His jaw tightened. "Then we must be prepared. A woman like her doesn't stop until she gets what she wants." Meanwhile, in Clara's apartment, the tension thickened. David tried to push back. "You're asking too much. They're my blood." Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "Then choose, David. Them or me." And as the silence stretched, David realized the woman he thought he loved wasn't offering him freedom. She was demanding his soul. The days in the hospital blurred into one another, but with each sunrise, Sophia felt a shift deep inside her. At first, she had been consumed by sorrow, waiting for David to return, clinging to the hope that he would choose his family. But after every unanswered call, every empty doorway, she realized the truth. He was gone. One evening, as Sophia sat by her baby's incubators, Mrs. Green placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Child, you've wept long enough. You can't change David's heart, but you can decide how to live. Your little ones need a mother who stands tall." Sophia looked at her children, their tiny chests rising and falling, their fists clenched as if ready to fight. Something stirred within her, something stronger than despair. She wiped her tears and whispered, "You're right. I can't wait for someone who chose to leave. I have to be their strength." Dr. James, who had been quietly monitoring the babies, overheard her words. His eyes softened. "That's the spirit, Sophia. You've survived the worst. Now it's time to build a life where no one can break you again." The next morning, Sophia asked for a mirror. When the nurse brought one, she stared at her reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, but beneath the weariness burned a quiet fire. She combed her hair, washed her face, and whispered to herself, "No more tears. Not for him." With Mrs. Green's encouragement and James's steady support, Sophia began walking the hospital halls again, regaining her strength. Each step was shaky, but each one carried purpose. Nurses who once pitied her began to admire her resilience. She was no longer the fragile woman abandoned on a hospital bed. She was becoming the mother her children needed. Clara, however, wasn't blind to the change. When she visited with David one afternoon, she noticed the difference immediately. Sophia wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't begging. She stood tall by the incubators, her eyes calm but fierce. Clara leaned toward David, whispering, "See? She doesn't even look weak anymore. She's pretending to be strong to trap you in guilt." But Sophia didn't flinch. She turned to Clara and said quietly, yet firmly, "I don't need his pity. And I don't need your lies. My children and I will survive, with or without him." David's eyes flickered with something, doubt, maybe even shame. But Clara gripped his arm tightly, pulling him away. After they left, Mrs. Green smiled proudly. "That's it, Sophia. Don't let them steal your spirit. Stand tall, and you'll see how life changes." Sophia gazed at her babies, her voice steady. "They'll grow up knowing the truth, and I'll make sure they're proud of me." That night, she began writing in a small notebook, plans for her children's future, dreams she once thought impossible. Each word was a step away from despair, a step toward freedom. And as she closed the notebook with determination, Sophia had no idea that her first real chance to fight back would arrive sooner than she expected. Weeks after leaving the hospital, Sophia settled into a modest apartment arranged by Mrs. Green's friend. It wasn't large, and the walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint, but to Sophia it felt like a sanctuary. Her baby's cribs lined the bedroom wall, their soft breaths filling the silence at night. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. She felt a flicker of hope. Still, life was far from easy. Bills piled up on the small kitchen table. Sophia stared at them one morning, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had no income, no husband to provide, and 3 fragile infants who needed more care than she could afford. Mrs. Green, ever watchful, placed a warm cup of tea in her hand. "You've faced death and betrayal, child. Money is only another storm to weather. You'll find a way." Sophia smiled faintly, though worry lingered in her eyes. I have to. For them. It was Dr. James who gave her the first push forward. One afternoon during a checkup for the babies, he noticed her nervous glances at the hospital's billing office. Quietly, he approached her. Sophia, I know you don't want pity, but there are support programs for single mothers. And I also know a foundation looking for someone exactly like you. They need tutors for children in recovery. Sophia's eyes widened. Me? But I haven't worked since. James cut her off gently. You're educated, patient, and strong. Don't underestimate yourself. This could be your chance to step into a new life. With encouragement from James and Mrs. Green, Sophia applied. Within weeks, she was hired. She began working part-time as a tutor for children battling illness. Kids who looked at her not with pity, but with admiration. Her gentle voice, her patience, and the way she spoke of resilience inspired them. And for Sophia, the paycheck, though modest, was a lifeline. Neighbors began to notice her strength too. The woman once seen as a victim was slowly becoming a pillar in her community. Other mothers offered support, local volunteers dropped by with groceries, and even strangers admired her courage. Meanwhile, David's visits grew fewer, his excuses sharper. Clara whispered in his ear that Sophia was moving on without him, twisting the truth to fuel his resentment. But what Clara didn't realize was that Sophia's newfound independence made her more radiant than ever. One evening, Sophia stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her clothes before leaving for work. Her babies cooed softly in the crib. She leaned down, kissing each tiny forehead. One day, you'll see what your mama built from nothing, and you'll know you were always worth it. She straightened, her reflection showing not the broken woman of the hospital, but a mother with fire in her eyes. And just as she locked the door behind her, unaware, a pair of watchful eyes followed her from across the street, someone who had been sent by Clara. David once believed he was invincible. With Clara by his side, he thought he had escaped the chains of family life, stepping into a future of wealth and indulgence. But slowly, almost invisibly, the ground beneath him began to crumble. It started at work. David had been neglecting meetings, distracted by Clara's constant demands for trips, dinners, and gifts. His boss noticed. You've missed 3 deadlines, David, the man said sharply one morning. You're not the man I hired. David stammered excuses, blaming stress, blaming anything but himself. But the truth was undeniable. His performance was slipping, and so was his reputation. At home, the bills piled up. Clara's taste for luxury grew heavier by the day. Designer clothes, jewelry, endless parties. David struggled to keep up. He dipped into savings, then into credit, convincing himself he'd catch up later. But later never came. One evening, after another extravagant dinner, Clara glanced at the credit card receipt and frowned. David, your limit's lower than I thought. Haven't you been paid? David rubbed his temples. I'm behind at work. Things are tight. Clara's smile vanished. Her voice turned cold. Tight? You promised me the world, David. I didn't choose you to live on scraps. Her words cut him deeper than she realized. For the first time, he saw the hunger in her eyes wasn't for him. It was for what he could give. Meanwhile, whispers about his betrayal of Sophia began to spread in the community. Old friends avoided him. Neighbors looked at him with disdain. That's the man who left his wife while she gave birth, they murmured. His name, once spoken with respect, became tainted with disgust. At night, he couldn't sleep. He thought of Sophia, holding their children alone, fighting without him. The guilt gnawed, but Clara's sharp tongue always pulled him back. Don't dwell on her, she'd hiss. She's weak. You're better off without her. But even Clara was changing. The sweetness in her voice soured each time money came up. She grew distant when he mentioned responsibility. The woman who once lured him with promises of freedom now looked at him with thinly veiled contempt. One night, David came home to find Clara on the phone, laughing. When she noticed him, she quickly ended the call. Who was that? He asked suspiciously. Just a friend, she answered too quickly, her eyes avoiding his. For the first time, David felt the sting of betrayal himself. Doubt crept into his chest. Had Clara already found someone else, someone richer, stronger, more useful? His world, once filled with illusions of power, was collapsing. His career faltered, his bank account drained, his reputation stained, and now even Clara, the woman he sacrificed everything for, was slipping away. He poured himself a drink, staring into the amber liquid. His reflection in the glass looked hollow, broken. "What have I done?" he whispered. And as if to answer him, Clara stepped into the room, her suitcase half packed, her eyes cold. She was preparing to leave him behind. The day of reckoning finally arrived. The courthouse buzzed with tension as people filled the gallery, eager to witness the scandal that had shaken the community. On one side sat Sophia, her posture steady, her hands resting gently on her lap. Mrs. Hap Green and Dr. James flanked her like silent guardians, their support unshakable. On the other side, David sat stiffly in a tailored suit that no longer masked his weariness. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights, his shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Beside him, Clara radiated false confidence, dressed impeccably, her lips curved in a smug smile. But even her polished veneer couldn't hide the unease flickering in her eyes. The judge entered, commanding silence. "This case will determine custody of the children and financial responsibility. We will hear testimony from both sides." Sophia rose first. Her voice trembled at the start, but grew steadier with each word. "Your Honor, I nearly lost my life bringing my children into this world. I begged my husband to be there, but he chose another woman instead. He left me alone on the most dangerous night of my life." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Sophia's eyes glistened, but she did not break. "I don't stand here as a victim. I stand as a mother who will fight for her children, no matter how alone I've been. They are my strength, and I will give them the future they deserve." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Harris." "Mr. Harris, your response?" David shifted uncomfortably. His lawyer whispered in his ear, urging him to remain calm. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my wife exaggerates. I support her, but I cannot be everywhere at once." "Lies!" Mrs. Green's voice burst out before she could stop herself. The judge rapped the gavel. "Order." Dr. James stepped forward as a witness. His voice was steady, precise. "Your Honor, I was there. Sophia's heart stopped. I revived her. Her husband never showed. He abandoned her and the children. That is not exaggeration. That is fact." The room buzzed again, whispers filling every corner. David's face flushed crimson. Clara gripped his arm tightly, whispering furiously in his ear. Finally, the judge turned to Clara. "Miss, you have been mentioned repeatedly. Do you have anything to say?" Clara rose gracefully, her voice honeyed. "Your Honor, Sophia is twisting the truth. David was with me because she drove him away with her weakness. She has always been manipulative, always." "Enough!" Sophia's voice rang out, stronger than ever before. The entire courtroom turned to her. She stood tall, her eyes blazing. "You can call me weak, but I survived what should have killed me. I raised 3 children when you were too busy stealing my husband. You may lie to the world, Clara, but you cannot erase the truth." The gallery erupted in murmurs of agreement, some even applauding before the gavel slammed again. And as Clara's mask slipped, the judge's next words carried the weight of fate. "This court will now hear evidence of financial misconduct." The courtroom buzzed as financial records were laid out for all to see. Documents showed how David had drained his savings, maxed out credit cards, and funneled money into Clara's endless luxuries, trips, jewelry, designer clothes. The evidence was undeniable. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Harris, do you deny these expenses?" David shifted in his seat, sweat forming at his brow. I was under pressure. I only wanted to keep Clara happy." The gallery erupted in whispers. The words sounded pitiful, like a confession of weakness rather than defense. Clara, sensing the tide turning, stiffened beside him. She leaned close, her voice sharp but quiet enough for only him to hear. "Don't drag me into this." David turned to her desperately. "But you spent it all. You said you needed these things, that it was for us." Clara pulled her arm away, her eyes cold. "No, David, you made those choices. Don't blame me." The shock on his face was almost painful to watch. For months, he had believed her sweet promises, surrendered his life to her, and now, when it mattered most, she was cutting herself free. Sophia sat across the room, watching silently. There was no joy in her expression, only quiet sorrow. She had once loved this man, but the figure before her was unrecognizable, weak, humiliated, abandoned. The judge called Clara to the stand. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached, her face the picture of elegance. But her testimony was a dagger. "I never asked David to spend beyond his means," she said smoothly. "He pursued me. He spoiled me because he wanted to. I never forced him. If he ruined his finances, that was his choice. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. David's mouth opened in shock. Clara, how can you say that, after everything I gave you, everything I sacrificed? Clara turned her head slightly, her lips curling in a faint smile. You should have thought of that before betraying your family. Her words hit him harder than any slap. The courtroom murmured with disgust. Even those who had once pitied David now looked at him with contempt. The judge banged the gavel. Order. But the damage was done. David sat frozen, abandoned by the very woman he had destroyed his marriage for. Clara stepped down from the stand, her chin lifted proudly, as though she had already won. When she returned to her seat, she whispered without a trace of warmth, "We're done, David. I don't stay with failures." He stared at her, his face pale, his eyes hollow. "You're leaving me? After everything?" Clara crossed her legs, her smile cold. "I never promised forever. Only fools believe in that." The courtroom buzzed louder than ever. Sophia closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude, not for Clara's cruelty, but for the justice slowly unfolding. And as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling, David realized the cruelest truth of all. He had lost not only his wife and children, but also the woman he betrayed them for. The gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom like thunder. The judge's voice carried finality. Custody is awarded solely to Mrs. Sophia Harris. Mr. Harris is ordered to provide financial support. This court recognizes the mother's sacrifice, resilience, and devotion. Applause erupted from the gallery, though quickly hushed by the gavel. Sophia sat still, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. This wasn't victory born of vengeance, it was justice, long overdue. Beside her, Mrs. Green squeezed her hand, whispering, "It's over, child. You've won." David sat slumped, his face ashen. Clara was nowhere to be seen. She had slipped out the back the moment the ruling turned against him. He was alone now, stripped of everything, his reputation, his wealth, and the two women he thought he controlled. As Sophia left the courthouse, flashes of cameras greeted her. Neighbors, once pitying, now looked at her with admiration. She shielded her babies from the noise, whispering softly, "We're going home." Years passed, and Sophia rebuilt her life with quiet determination. She worked tirelessly, balancing jobs and studies, pouring every ounce of love into raising her 3 children. Nights were long, money was tight, but she never wavered. Her children grew, each one carrying a piece of her strength. Ethan, the eldest, became a lawyer, his sharp mind dedicated to defending those abandoned and betrayed, just as his mother once had been. At his graduation, he held Sophia's hand high and said, "I fight for justice because my mother taught me never to stay silent." Grace, the second, became a doctor specializing in obstetrics, the very field where her mother's life had hung by a thread. Her patients adored her warmth and devotion. "Every baby deserves a safe beginning," she often said, "and every mother deserves someone who won't walk away." Michael, the youngest, became a successful entrepreneur. But unlike his father, he built his empire on integrity, donating generously to single mothers and children's charities. "Because of my mother, I know where true strength lies," he told reporters. Through it all, Sophia remained their anchor. She watched her children rise, her heart swelling with pride, knowing every tear, every sacrifice had led to this. She was no longer the abandoned wife in a hospital bed. She was the matriarch of a legacy built on resilience and love. One afternoon, at a public event honoring community heroes, Sophia stood beside her grown children as they spoke of her sacrifices. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, many with tears in their eyes, and in the back of that crowd stood David, older, smaller, broken. His eyes filled with regret as he watched the family he had thrown away. No one applauded him. No one remembered him with pride. He was just a shadow of what he could have been. Sophia, however, stood tall. She didn't look his way. Her gaze was fixed on her children, the proof of her triumph. And as the applause thundered, Sophia finally felt it in her bones. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had built her into the woman her children would honor forever. So, my friend, the story has now come to a close. If you're still here, it means something in Sophia's journey has touched your heart. Maybe it's her courage. Maybe it's the way love and sacrifice can overcome betrayal. Life often gives us pain we don't deserve. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Sophia chose strength, and so can we. Her story reminds us that betrayal doesn't define us. Our response does. Healing begins when we stop clinging to what hurt us and start building what will protect us. Like Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul. Together, let's keep spreading strength and healing. Let me ask you something. What would you do if the person you trusted most, the one you thought would protect you, left you alone in the street, in the rain, carrying their child inside you? Can you imagine that? Can you feel that sting in your chest right now? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when fate itself decides to step in. A millionaire, powerful and cold, thought he could throw away the woman who loved him most. But life doesn't let cruelty go unpaid, does it? I want you to stay with me because the story you're about to hear isn't just drama. It's a mirror. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you've been abandoned. Maybe you know what it feels like to stand in the middle of a storm and wonder if you'll ever see the sun again. If that's you, then trust me, you are not here by accident. And before we dive in, my friends, I need to ask you one more thing. If this story touches your heart, if it makes you think of someone who needs hope right now, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. Because together, we're not just watching stories, we're healing through them. Now, are you ready to see what happens when fate takes its revenge? The night was colder than anyone expected for early spring. The city streets glistened with a thin film of rain, streetlights flickering against the wet pavement like broken stars. On one of those streets, where taxis sped recklessly and pedestrians hurried home, a scene unfolded that no one could have predicted. A young woman, visibly pregnant, was standing alone, trembling, her hands clutching her swollen belly. Her name was Elena. She had just been abandoned by the man she believed was her protector, her husband, the father of her unborn child. That man was Marcus Hale, a self-made millionaire known for his ruthless business moves and impeccable tailored suits. Tonight, however, his ruthlessness had reached its cruelest form yet. After a heated argument in the back seat of his luxury black Mercedes, he shoved the door open and ordered Elena to get out. She begged him, her voice cracking with desperation. "Marcus, please, I have nowhere to go. The baby." But his eyes were as cold as steel. "You'll figure it out. You always do," he muttered, before slamming the car door and speeding away into the night. His taillights disappeared down the slick avenue, leaving her stranded in a world that suddenly felt merciless. Elena staggered, her shoes slipping on the wet pavement, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and disbelief. She wrapped her coat tighter around her body, though the fabric was thin and hardly enough to shield her from the chill. The city that once promised dreams now mocked her with its neon signs and honking horns. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was an abandoned soul carrying a fragile life inside her. Passers-by glanced but didn't stop. Some whispered, others shook their heads. To them, she was just another struggling woman on the edge of collapse. No one knew her story. No one knew she had once lived in a penthouse where marble floors gleamed and crystal chandeliers sparkled, where she believed love had wrapped her like a blanket. The rain intensified. Elena tried to cross the street, her vision blurred by tears. Her mind screamed, don't fall, protect the baby." Each step felt heavier than the last. Her body trembled, her breath shallow, her heart racing with panic. Then it happened. Tires screeched, headlights flared, and a car came hurtling toward her. Time slowed. She raised her hands instinctively, as if to shield her unborn child. A scream tore through the air, her own, and then the violent thud echoed across the street. The world spun into chaos. When she opened her eyes, the cold ground met her cheek. Pain seared through her side. People rushed toward her now, their gasps and shouts piercing the night. Someone shouted to call an ambulance. Another draped a coat over her trembling body. She could barely whisper, her lips trembling, "My baby, please, my baby." As sirens wailed in the distance, fate carved its first line into Marcus Hale's downfall. He didn't know that abandoning Elena wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was the moment destiny chose to turn against him. For while Alina lay on the pavement fighting for her life, a chain of events had already been set into motion. And what Marcus didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that Alina was far from powerless. Beneath her fragile exterior, beneath the pain and betrayal, there was a secret, one that would soon rise like a storm. That secret would not only change her life, but would destroy his world forever. And when the ambulance doors closed on that rainy night, it wasn't just Elena's survival that was at stake. It was the beginning of Marcus Hale's reckoning. Elena Martinez had not always lived in glittering penthouses or walked through marble hallways. Before Marcus Hale entered her life, she had been just another woman in the bustling city, working long shifts at a small community library. She was 25 then, with warm brown eyes and hair that curled softly around her shoulders. Her beauty wasn't loud or extravagant. It was quiet, the kind that lingered in memory like a familiar melody. She grew up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of the city. Her parents, immigrants from Mexico, had raised her on values of hard work and humility. They didn't have much money, but they had love, and that love became the foundation of Elena's strength. She learned early how to make do with little, how to stretch meals, how to share hand-me-down clothes, how to smile even when life felt heavy. Her father worked construction until his back gave out, and her mother cleaned offices at night. Elena often helped her mother mop floors after school, carrying her books in one hand and a bucket in the other. She never complained. Instead, she dreamed of becoming a teacher, someone who could inspire children the way her parents inspired her. But dreams have a way of bending when life throws unexpected storms. By the time she was in college, juggling part-time jobs and classes, her mother fell gravely ill. Cancer. The medical bills piled up higher than Elena's paychecks, and eventually she had to put her studies on hold. She took care of her mother until the very end, holding her hand through the pain, whispering prayers into the silence. When her mother passed away, Elena felt as though part of her soul had been torn away. Her father, broken with grief, sank deeper into his own silence, leaving Elena to carry the weight of survival alone. She found herself working at the library full-time, shelving books by day, tutoring children by night, barely making rent. Life was tough, but she held on. Because that's what her mother had taught her, to keep walking even when the road seemed endless. Then Marcus appeared. He came into the library one afternoon, tall, confident, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He wasn't there for books. He was there for a meeting with a city councilman who had insisted on using the library's private reading room for some political discussion. Elena had been the one to guide Marcus there, her hands slightly trembling as she noticed his piercing blue eyes and the way he carried himself like the world belonged to him. To her surprise, Marcus noticed her. "Do you work here every day?" he had asked, his voice smooth like polished steel. She nodded shyly. He smiled, and that smile became the beginning of a whirlwind she could never have imagined. In the weeks that followed, Marcus returned to the library, not for politics, not for business, but for her. He charmed her with flowers, took her to dinner she couldn't have afforded in her wildest dreams, and listened when she talked about her parents and her childhood. He seemed so different from the cold world of wealth he came from. With him, she felt seen. She felt chosen. 6 months later, they were married in a quiet civil ceremony. Elena thought she had stepped into a fairy tale. From her modest apartment, she moved into Marcus's luxury penthouse with panoramic views of the city. She went from counting pennies for groceries to shopping in boutiques where price tags didn't matter. Yet, despite the glittering world around her, Elena never forgot who she was. She still cooked simple meals, still called her father every week, still found comfort in the smell of old books. But Marcus began to change. At first, he was tender, protective, but as his business empire grew, so did his arrogance. He began to criticize her for being too quiet, too plain, too unambitious. "You don't fit into my world," he told her one night after a gala, where she had worn a modest dress she thought was elegant enough. His words pierced her heart like shards of glass. Still, Elena held on. When she discovered she was pregnant, her heart soared with hope. She thought the baby would bring them closer. She imagined Marcus holding their child, imagined their fractured love being mended by the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. For a moment, Marcus seemed happy, even proud. He promised to take care of her, promised they would be a family. But promises are fragile in the hands of a man who worships money more than love. As her belly grew, so did the distance between them. Marcus spent more nights at business meetings and more weekends traveling. Elena tried to ignore the rumors she overheard, the whispers of a young woman Marcus was seen with at exclusive restaurants, the perfume lingering on his suits that wasn't hers. She convinced herself it was stress, that he would come back to her once the baby arrived. Then came the night that shattered her world. After another argument, this time about her, burdening him with doctor's appointments and medical bills, Marcus ordered the driver to stop the car in the middle of a busy street. Elena begged him, tears streaming down her face, her hands gripping her belly. But he had already grown tired of her. In his mind, she was no longer the beautiful woman he once courted. She was a weight, a reminder of responsibility he didn't want. And so he left her there, in the rain, as if she were nothing more than a forgotten chapter in his story. That was who Elena was when the car struck her, a woman abandoned, heartbroken, vulnerable. But beneath her fragile frame burned a fire she didn't yet know existed. Life had already taught her to survive storms. And this storm, this betrayal, would not break her forever. Because while Marcus thought he had discarded her like trash, fate was quietly preparing her for a resurrection that would shake his empire to its core. And as she lay in the hospital bed that night, weak but breathing, Elena whispered to her unborn child, "We will rise again." The sterile white of the hospital room glowed under fluorescent lights, buzzing faintly like the sound of trapped bees. Elena lay there, her body bruised, her spirit fractured, but her hands never left her stomach. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring both her heartbeat and that of the child she carried. Every time the soft rhythm echoed through the room, she clung to it like a lifeline. The hospital wasn't private or exclusive. It was a public one, crowded with patients and the faint smell of disinfectant lingering in every hallway. Nurses rushed past, their shoes squeaking against the linoleum floors, voices blending into a constant hum of urgency. Elena's bed was by a cracked window, the blinds rattling whenever the wind pushed against the glass. The blanket was thin, barely enough to shield her from the draft, and the water pitcher at her bedside had gone lukewarm. This was her reality now, a reality of survival. Meanwhile, just a few miles across the city, another scene played out, one that stood in brutal contrast. Inside the Crystal Tower, a skyscraper Marcus Hale had purchased last year, the top floor glowed like a palace suspended above the clouds. A grand gala was unfolding. Chandeliers, each worth more than a family's yearly income, spilled golden light across marble floors. Waiters in pressed tuxedos glided like dancers balancing silver trays of champagne. The city's elite, politicians, tech moguls, and celebrity investors, moved in a whirl of sequins and silk, their laughter echoing across the cavernous hall. At the center of it all was Marcus. He wore a custom black suit, tailored to perfection, the fabric shimmering under the lights. On his arm wasn't Elena, the wife who lay in a hospital bed clinging to life. No. He appeared with Vanessa Moore, a socialite barely out of her 20s, draped in a gown of scarlet satin. Cameras flashed as Marcus whispered something into her ear, making her laugh, her hand brushing possessively against his chest. No one in that glittering room questioned Elena's absence. In Marcus's world, appearances mattered more than truth. He smiled for photographs, raised his glass during toasts, and announced a new real estate venture worth hundreds of millions. To the crowd, he was untouchable, a man of vision, power, and endless charm. Yet outside those glass walls, fate had begun drawing its own picture, one that glitter couldn't hide. Back at the hospital, Elena's father sat beside her bed. His once strong hands, now rough and weathered from years of labor, trembled as he touched her arm. "Mija," he whispered in Spanish, his voice breaking. "You will not go through this alone. Your mother would want you to fight." Tears slipped from Elena's closed eyes. She wanted to answer, to promise she would rise, but her throat was too raw, her body too weak. Instead, she pressed his hand against her belly. The baby kicked softly, as if answering for her. Her world had narrowed to this small room, this fragile hope. But even in her brokenness, a spark was being lit. The starkness of the hospital, the kindness of strangers who rushed to her aid, the quiet strength of her father, all of it carved into her heart, a truth she would later use as a weapon. She had survived the street, the betrayal, and the impact of a car. She could survive anything. The city outside seemed almost cruel in its indifference. Neon lights blinked, billboards advertised luxury goods, and taxis honked impatiently. Life went on, as if Alina's suffering was invisible. But in Marcus's tower, the music grew louder. Guests clinked glasses, applauding him as he declared, "Hale Enterprises will reshape this city's skyline." His voice boomed with pride, echoing off the crystal walls. Vanessa kissed his cheek for the cameras, her scarlet lips leaving a faint mark that made whispers ripple through the crowd. To him, Elena was already erased. Yet destiny has a way of weaving threads unseen by men like Marcus. While he basked in temporary glory, his abandoned wife was being watched over by forces he underestimated. Her father's devotion, the resilience of her unborn child, and the quiet power of survival. The two settings, the fragile hospital room and the glittering tower, were not just backdrops, they were symbols. One showed the cruelty of a man who had forgotten love, the other the strength of a woman who had nothing left but the will to endure. And in stories like these, it is never the chandeliers or champagne that last. It is the fire born in suffering that eventually lights the darkest halls. Elena didn't know it yet, but the hospital would not only be the place where she clung to life. It would be the ground where her rebirth began. And while Marcus raised his glass to a future built on lies, fate was already pouring the first cracks into his empire. Cracks that Elena herself would one day turn into an earthquake. Marcus Hale's rise to power was the kind of story people loved to tell at cocktail parties. He wasn't born into wealth. He clawed his way up from nothing, using ambition like a blade and charm like a shield. In his early 20s, he worked as a real estate broker, hustling deals others thought impossible. By 30, he had leveraged enough contacts and cunning to buy his first skyscraper. By 35, his name was whispered with both envy and fear in the boardrooms of New York. But success has a way of sharpening the worst edges of a man. Marcus had built his empire on risk, but the higher he climbed, the less human he became. To his employees, he was a god in a tailored suit, a man whose approval meant career advancement and whose disfavor meant instant exile. To the media, he was the shark of the skyline, ruthless yet captivating. To Elena, however, he was supposed to be something different. He was supposed to be a husband, a protector, a father. Instead, he became her destroyer. Vanessa Moore entered Marcus's life like a spark on gasoline. She was 26, a former model turned influencer with millions of followers who adored her curated life of red carpets and luxury vacations. She was beautiful in a way that demanded attention, icy blonde hair, piercing green eyes, and a figure sculpted to perfection. But beneath the glamour was ambition sharper than any blade. Marcus first met her at a private gala hosted by one of his investors. Elena had been invited too, but she was already several months pregnant, feeling tired and insecure in her modest gown. That night, she stayed home, believing Marcus's claim that it would be strictly business. But it was anything but. Vanessa was there, draped in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered with every step. She laughed at Marcus's jokes, touched his arm just long enough to send a message, and leaned close when the cameras flashed. By the end of the evening, whispers spread like wildfire. Marcus Hale had found himself a new companion. For Marcus, Vanessa represented everything Elena didn't. She was glamorous, ambitious, hungry for power. She fit perfectly into the image he wanted the world to see, the unstoppable tycoon with the perfect woman on his arm. Elena's simplicity, her kindness, her quiet strength, qualities that once charmed him, now seemed like weaknesses in his distorted eyes. At first, Marcus tried to live in two worlds. He came home to Elena, offering her empty promises and half-hearted affection, while spending nights in penthouse suites with Vanessa. But secrets don't stay hidden for long. Elena began noticing the signs: lipstick stains on his shirts, the faint scent of another woman's perfume, his constant excuses about late meetings. When she confronted him, Marcus didn't deny it. Instead, he turned the blame on her. "You've let yourself go," he snapped one evening, ignoring the fact that she was carrying his child. "You don't understand my world, Elena. You never did. Vanessa gets it. She belongs beside me. You You just dragged me down." Those words cut deeper than any blade. And yet, Elena stayed, hoping the baby would remind him of who he used to be. She prayed that the man she once loved still existed somewhere beneath the arrogance. But Marcus wasn't looking back. He was intoxicated by power and Vanessa's adoration. Together, they became the couple everyone gossiped about, the ruthless millionaire and the glamorous socialite. Tabloids splashed their photos across covers, while Elena's existence was erased from Marcus's narrative. The cruelty didn't stop there. Marcus began to humiliate Elena in subtle ways. He criticized her appearance in front of others, ignored her at events, and eventually stopped bringing her altogether. When she tried to talk about the baby's future, he brushed her off, saying, "Don't worry about it. I'll handle everything." But what he meant wasn't protection. It was control. He saw Elena not as a partner, but as a burden. Vanessa fueled his arrogance. She whispered poison into his ear, mocking Elena behind closed doors. "She looks like a charity case," Vanessa sneered one night after spotting Elena at a cafe. "She doesn't fit your world, Marcus. People laugh at you when you show up with her." Marcus laughed too, though deep down, some part of him knew the truth. Elena was worth more than Vanessa could ever be. But he had already chosen the glitter over the gold. That choice reached its peak the night he abandoned Elena on the street. Vanessa had been pressuring him, demanding he prove his loyalty. "If you're really mine," she said, her green eyes flashing, "then cut ties. Completely. No more wife, no more sympathy act. Choose me or lose me." Marcus, blinded by lust and pride, chose her. He shoved Elena out of the car that rainy night, leaving her broken in the street. And as he sped away toward Vanessa's waiting arms, he didn't look back. To the world, Marcus Hale was untouchable. To himself, he was invincible. But fate does not forget cruelty. For every toast he raised at glittering galas, for every photo he staged with Vanessa on his arm, a storm brewed in silence. Elena's suffering had been seen, not just by strangers on the street that night, but by destiny itself. And destiny has no mercy for men who discard love for vanity. Because while Marcus and Vanessa celebrated their shallow empire, Elena's quiet strength was about to become the weapon that would destroy them both. 2 weeks had passed since the night Marcus left Elena bleeding on the street. Though the hospital stitched her body back together, her spirit still bore open wounds. She tried to focus on her baby, telling herself every day that she had to survive for the tiny heartbeat inside her. But survival was never easy when humiliation trailed her like a shadow. News of Marcus's relationship with Vanessa had spread quickly, the tabloids ravenous for every photo. There he was, smiling beside his glamorous mistress, attending charity galas as though nothing had happened. In glossy magazines, Vanessa glowed in designer gowns, while Marcus boasted about his expanding empire. Not once did he acknowledge Elena, his wife, his unborn child, or the pain he had inflicted. To the public eye, she didn't exist. But humiliation has a cruel way of making itself seen. One gray afternoon, Elena received a phone call from her father. His voice shook. "Mija, they're talking about you on the television. About Marcus. About the baby." Her heart froze. She turned on the small hospital TV, and there it was, a press conference held in the Crystal Tower lobby. Marcus stood at the podium, Vanessa at his side, cameras flashing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice dripping with polished arrogance, "I want to clarify recent rumors. My relationship with Vanessa is not new. It is strong, committed, and real. As for the other stories circulating..." He paused dramatically, flashing his perfect smile. "Let me assure you, I am not responsible for anyone else's choices or circumstances. Some people cling to the past, but I choose the future." Vanessa leaned in, kissed his cheek, and the crowd erupted in applause. Elena's knees buckled. She clutched her stomach, her baby kicking in response to her racing heartbeat. The words rang in her ears like thunder. Not responsible. Clinging to the past. He had reduced her entire existence, her marriage, her child, her pain, to a disposable rumor. But fate wasn't done with her humiliation. 3 nights later, Elena decided to leave the hospital for a short walk. She wore a loose coat, her hair tied back, hoping to breathe fresh air away from the suffocating smell of disinfectant. As she stepped outside, she noticed flashing lights at the nearby hotel. A crowd had gathered, cheering, cameras raised. Against her better judgment, Elena drew closer. And there they were, Marcus and Vanessa, stepping out of a limousine, dazzling under the paparazzi's glare. He wore a tuxedo, she shimmered in gold silk. The event was the annual Metropolitan Charity Ball, one Elena had attended with Marcus the previous year. Back then, she had stood proudly at his side, believing in their love. Now she was a ghost among strangers, watching from the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions. "Marcus, any comments on your wife's condition?" Marcus didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on Vanessa's hand, pulling her closer. "Elena is no longer part of my life," he declared, his voice amplified through microphones. "I wish her well, but my future is with Vanessa." The words landed like knives. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some reporters exchanging shocked glances. But Marcus didn't stop. He looked straight at the cameras and added, "I will not be held hostage by the past." Vanessa smirked, her arms sliding around his waist like a queen claiming her throne. Elena's vision blurred with tears. The humiliation was complete. Not only had he abandoned her, but now he erased her publicly, as if she and the baby were stains to be scrubbed from his perfect image. Strangers whispered around her. Some pointed, recognizing her fragile figure in the shadows. "That's her," someone murmured. "The wife, the pregnant one he left." Her cheeks burned. She turned away, stumbling into the dark street, her breath shallow, her chest tightening. The voices followed her, mocking, pitying, cruel. She had never felt so small, so invisible, so utterly destroyed. That night, back in her hospital bed, Elena wept until dawn. She pressed her hand against her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought your father would love us. I thought." Her words broke into sobs. She felt powerless, shattered beyond repair. For the first time, Elena considered giving up, not on her life, but on her fight. The weight of shame pressed down like chains. What was the point of resisting when Marcus controlled everything? The money, the media, the narrative? But fate has a strange way of finding cracks in despair. The very next morning, a nurse brought in a newspaper someone had left in the waiting room. Elena didn't want to look, but her father insisted. "Read this, Hija. Just read." There, on the front page, was a single photograph. Marcus smirking at the gala, Vanessa clinging to him like a trophy. But beside it was another picture. Elena, pale and bruised, being carried into an ambulance the night of the accident. A bystander had snapped it, and now it had surfaced. The headline screamed, "Millionaire's pregnant wife abandoned, hit by car hours before he appears with mistress." The article painted a different story than Marcus's polished lies. It described witnesses who had seen him push Elena from his car, leaving her on the rain-slicked street. It quoted doctors speaking anonymously about her condition, about how both mother and child had been in critical danger. Suddenly, Marcus's perfect image had cracks, and the world began to ask questions. For Elena, it was a double-edged blade. She hated the pity, hated being splashed across tabloids as the tragic wife. But for the first time, she wasn't invisible. The truth, or at least part of it, was out, and that truth would become the seed of something greater. Because humiliation, when endured too long, stops being a wound, it becomes fuel. And Elena, though still fragile, was beginning to burn. And as Marcus and Vanessa laughed at their own reflection in a golden mirror that night, they didn't know the woman they had discarded was already rising from the ashes, ready to turn her shame into fire. Elena had always believed she was strong. She survived her mother's illness, her father's silence, the endless days of working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. But nothing had prepared her for this. The humiliation replayed in her mind like a cruel film. Marcus's words at the gala, "I will not be held hostage by the past," echoed louder than the applause that followed. The sight of Vanessa smirking beside him haunted her dreams. And the whispers of strangers on the sidewalk, "That's her, the wife, the pregnant one he left," stabbed deeper than any knife. She tried to eat, but food turned to ash in her mouth. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw headlights, heard tires screeching, felt the thud of her body hitting the street. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat, her hands trembling as she clutched her belly. Her father stayed by her side, sleeping in a chair beside her hospital bed. He tried to be strong, but even he couldn't hide the sorrow in his eyes. One night, she overheard him praying softly in Spanish. "Dios mío, give her strength. Don't let my daughter break." But Elena was breaking. The doctors advised her to avoid stress, but how could she when her entire world had collapsed? Her marriage was gone, her reputation shredded, her body fragile. She was 6 months pregnant, alone and powerless against the man who once vowed to love her. One evening, as rain tapped against the hospital window, Elena reached her lowest point. She sat upright in bed, staring at her reflection in the darkened glass. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Pale, hollow-eyed, her hair limp around her face. She looked like a ghost. A whisper slipped from her lips. Maybe Marcus was right. The thought horrified her, but it sank deeper with each passing second. Maybe she was too weak. Maybe she didn't belong in his world of glitter and power. Maybe her child would be better off without her dragging them through a life of shame. Tears streamed down her face. She pressed her palm to her belly and whispered, "I don't know if I can do this." The baby kicked in response, as if protesting her words. She gasped, covering her mouth, sobs shaking her fragile body. That tiny movement, so small yet so alive, pulled her back from the edge, if only slightly. Still, the darkness clung to her like a suffocating blanket. The following days blurred. Nurses checked her vitals, her father tried to feed her, but Elena drifted through it all like a shadow. Depression wrapped its claws around her, whispering lies that she was worthless, that Marcus had been justified, that she was nothing but a burden. Then came the night she almost gave up. Her father had stepped out to get coffee, leaving her alone. The hospital room was silent, the only sound the steady beep of the monitor. Elena stared at the IV in her arm, at the window open just a crack to let in the cold night air. For the first time, she considered ending the pain altogether. A single thought consumed her. If I disappear, maybe the baby won't have to suffer. She slid her feet to the floor, trembling, her breath shallow. But as she stood, the baby kicked again, harder this time. She froze. Another kick, and another. Tears flooded her eyes as she clutched her stomach. "No," she whispered. "No, I can't. You need me." Collapsing back onto the bed, she sobbed uncontrollably, rocking herself as though trying to cradle the life inside her. She realized then that despair had nearly stolen everything. Not just her life, but her child's chance to know a mother's love. Her father returned moments later, his coffee spilling as he rushed to her side. "Elena, Dios mío, what happened?" She shook her head, unable to speak. But in her eyes, he saw both the darkness she had battled and the fragile spark that still remained. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he hadn't since she was a little girl. "Listen to me," he said fiercely, his voice breaking. "You are not weak. You are my daughter. You are your mother's daughter. You will rise. Do you hear me?" His words pierced the fog. For the first time in weeks, Elena clung to something other than despair. Her father's faith in her, the baby's tiny kicks, the memory of her mother's strength. But recovery was not instant. The days ahead were still heavy, filled with tears and nightmares. She struggled to eat, struggled to smile, yet slowly, painfully, a shift began. Each time her baby moved, she reminded herself, "I'm still needed." Each time her father held her hand, she remembered, "I'm not alone." And then came the letter. One morning, a nurse handed her an envelope. "This came for you," she said gently. The paper was thick, expensive, the handwriting elegant. Inside was a single note. "Mrs. Hale, the world has seen your suffering, but you are not invisible. You have allies you don't yet know. When you are ready, contact the number below. Your future does not end here." No signature, just a phone number. Elena's heart pounded as she read the words over and over. Who had sent it? A journalist? A stranger? Someone from Marcus's world who secretly despised him? She didn't know. But for the first time since her collapse, she felt something other than despair. She felt curiosity. The darkness hadn't vanished, but a door had opened, just a crack. And sometimes a crack is all it takes for light to flood in. And as Elena held the letter in her trembling hands, she didn't realize she was holding the first key to her transformation, the first step in turning her pain into power. The mysterious letter lay on Elena's lap, its edges slightly crumpled from the way her trembling fingers had clutched it through the night. She had read it over and over, each word digging into her soul like a seed waiting to grow. You are not invisible. You have allies you don't yet know. Contact the number below. At first, she thought it was a cruel joke, another reminder of her shattered life. But something about the handwriting, The weight of the paper, the confidence in the words, told her it was real. It wasn't pity, it was a promise. Her father urged caution. "Mija, people can be dangerous. Don't trust so quickly." But Elena felt something stir inside her, a spark of curiosity, maybe even hope. For weeks she had been drowning in despair, invisible in Marcus's glittering shadow. And now, someone was telling her she wasn't alone. That evening, when her father had gone home to rest, Elena picked up the hospital phone. Her hand shook as she dialed the number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then a deep, calm voice answered. "Mrs. Hale?" She froze. "Who is this?" "I represent people who have been watching your husband," the voice said. "Powerful people. He believes himself untouchable, but his arrogance has made him enemies, and now he has made himself vulnerable by what he did to you." Elena's breath caught. "Why would anyone care about me?" "Because," the voice replied firmly, "you are the key to his undoing." Before she could respond, the man continued. "We know who you really are, Elena Martinez Hale. You are not just a discarded wife. You are the rightful heir to property your husband tried to bury. Land, investments. Your name is still on the documents. He thinks you don't know, but we do. And if you are willing, we will help you reclaim what is yours." Elena's head spun. She had never cared about money, never looked at Marcus's contracts or asked about his business. She thought she had nothing, that she was penniless without him. But now, this stranger was telling her Marcus had built part of his empire on assets connected to her. "Who are you?" she whispered again. There was a pause. Then, "An old friend of your mother." Her heart stopped. My mother? Yes, she may be gone, but the legacy she left you is not. Marcus has tried to erase it, but he can't. Not unless you let him. The line went silent. Then it clicked dead. Elena sat frozen, the receiver pressed against her ear long after the call ended. An old friend of her mother. A hidden legacy. Documents with her name. It was too much to believe, and yet, something deep in her soul told her it was true. Her mother had always whispered to her, "You are stronger than you know." Maybe this was what she meant. The next morning, Elena found an envelope slipped under her hospital door. Inside were copies of legal documents, property deeds, stock certificates, accounts with her signature. Proof. Marcus had hidden them, funneled them into his empire, but they still tied back to her. Her father's eyes widened as he read. "Hija, do you understand what this means? He cannot erase you. By law, you own part of what he claims as his." The weight of despair began to lift, replaced by something unfamiliar. Power. For the first time, Elena realized she wasn't as helpless as Marcus wanted her to believe. He had discarded her like trash, but he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated her. And she wasn't alone. The following week, she was released from the hospital. She moved into her father's modest home, far from the glitter of Marcus's penthouse. The neighborhood smelled of fresh bread from the corner bakery. Children's laughter echoed through narrow streets, and the nights were quiet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, and it gave her space to heal. But Elena was no longer content with survival. She wanted justice. With the help of the anonymous contact, who later introduced himself as Gabriel, her mother's former lawyer, Elena began piecing together the truth. Gabriel revealed that her mother had once owned significant property shares before marrying her father. Investments Marcus had quietly seized through their marriage. "Your mother trusted me," Gabriel told her during their first meeting. "And now I will honor her by protecting you." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. For so long she believed Marcus had all the power, that she was nothing but a shadow of his empire. But here, in dusty folders and signed documents, was proof that she still had a voice. Her breakdown had left her fragile, but now she felt something different rising inside her. Steel. She began to change. No more hospital gowns, no more hiding behind fear. She started wearing clothes that reminded her of her strength. Simple but elegant dresses, her mother's old jewelry, polished and gleaming, shoes that clicked with confidence against the pavement. She carried herself taller, her hands often resting protectively on her belly, as though to say, "We are still here. We will not be erased." And slowly, whispers began to spread in the city. Reporters caught sight of her leaving Gabriel's office. Paparazzi snapped photos of her walking through the courthouse steps with her father at her side. Headlines shifted from "Millionaire's Mistress Triumphs" to "Abandoned Wife Fights Back." Marcus laughed when he first heard. "She's weak. he told Vanessa over champagne in their penthouse. Let her try. She has nothing. But beneath his arrogance, a flicker of unease began to grow. Because Marcus knew better than anyone, Elena's name was on those documents. And if she chose to fight, she could unravel everything he had built. The tables were turning. Elena was no longer just the humiliated wife. She was the woman Marcus had underestimated. And now, with the truth in her hands, she was ready to transform despair into vengeance. And as Marcus toasted his own reflection in a glass of brandy that night, he had no idea that his greatest downfall had already begun, in the quiet determination of the woman he left for dead. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Elena had ever known. For the first time since Marcus abandoned her, she woke each day not in despair but with purpose. With Gabriel's guidance and her father's quiet strength at her side, she began preparing for a battle she never thought she'd fight. The transformation started small. She cut her hair, the limp strands replaced by a bold, confident style. She wore tailored dresses that hugged her figure proudly, showing the world that pregnancy was not weakness, but power. No longer did she walk with downcast eyes. Her steps carried intention, her shoulders squared, her gaze steady. The press noticed. Headlines shifted again. Elena Martinez Hale returns stronger than ever. Photos of her stepping out of courtrooms, her hand protectively over her baby bump, flooded tabloids. For once, she wasn't painted as the victim. She was the fighter, the survivor. But Marcus still believed she was no threat. She's making noise, that's all, he scoffed to Vanessa one evening as they lounged in their penthouse. Let her talk to reporters. None of it matters. I own the board. I own the judges. She can't touch me. Vanessa smirked, swirling wine in her glass. Then why do you look worried, Marcus? He ignored her, but deep inside, fear gnawed at him. He remembered the documents with Elena's name, the whispers among his investors, the way certain partners had grown hesitant since the scandal broke. For the first time, cracks appeared in his empire. The turning point came at the annual Skyline Gala, a night meant to celebrate Marcus's latest multi-billion-dollar development project. It was his crowning glory, his chance to show the city he was still untouchable. Politicians, CEOs, and celebrities filled the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers raining golden light on polished marble floors. Marcus arrived with Vanessa on his arm, smug as ever. But fate had prepared a different performance. As the orchestra played and the crowd mingled, the heavy doors of the ballroom swung open. Conversations hushed. Heads turned. And there she was, Elena. She walked into the room like a storm disguised as grace. Her gown was midnight blue, flowing elegantly over her rounded belly, the diamonds at her neck catching every glint of light. At her side was Gabriel, dignified and commanding, his presence unmistakable. And just behind them, two of Marcus's former investors, men once loyal to him, now aligned with her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Elena's entrance was not just unexpected, it was electric. Marcus's face drained of color. What the hell is she doing here? He muttered under his breath, his grip on Vanessa tightening. Elena didn't look at him. She walked with calm authority, greeting guests who had once ignored her. Some reached for her hands, others whispered support. For the first time, Marcus wasn't the star of the evening. She was. The climax came when the host invited Marcus to the stage to deliver his speech. He straightened his jacket, forced a smile, and strode forward. But before he could begin, Elena stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear, steady. "I have something to say." The crowd shifted, eager, sensing scandal. Marcus hissed, "Sit down, Elena. This isn't your place." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "It was never my place, was it, Marcus? You made sure of that, but tonight it is." The host, sensing drama too irresistible to ignore, handed her the microphone. The room fell silent. Elena raised her chin. 2 months ago, this man abandoned me on the street while I was carrying his child. Hours later, I was struck by a car and nearly lost my life. While I lay bleeding, he appeared with his mistress, smiling for cameras, pretending I did not exist. But I am here. I survived, and I will not be erased. Gasps erupted, whispers spreading like wildfire. Marcus's jaw clenched, his smile frozen in place. Elena continued, her voice unwavering. This empire he boasts about, these towers, these deals, he did not build them alone. Documents prove that part of what he owns still belongs to me, through my family's legacy. He thought I was too weak to fight. but he was wrong. With that, Gabriel stepped forward, holding up a folder thick with papers. "Here is the evidence," he announced. "Contracts, deeds, investments, all signed in Elena's name. Marcus Hale has been profiting off assets he tried to bury, and the law will no longer allow it." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing, guests whispering in shock. Investors pulled out phones, murmuring about pulling their funds. Politicians exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus tried to speak, his voice desperate. "This is nonsense. She's lying. She's nothing without me." But his words fell flat. No one believed him anymore. Elena's eyes locked on his, steady and fierce. "You left me on the street, Marcus, but I rose, and I will keep rising, for myself, for my child, and tonight everyone will finally see you for what you are." The crowd thundered with applause. Marcus stood frozen, his carefully crafted image crumbling around him. Vanessa, sensing the shift, quietly slipped her arm away from his. The cameras captured it all. The downfall of the millionaire who thought himself untouchable. Undone not by rivals or markets, but by the woman he discarded. By the end of the night, Marcus's investors announced their withdrawal. His project collapsed within days. Lawsuits followed, the evidence Elena revealed tearing through his empire like wildfire. Elena, however, emerged stronger than ever. With Gabriel's help, she reclaimed her rightful assets, securing a future not just for herself, but for her child. She didn't need Marcus's wealth. She had her own. She didn't need his name. Her own was enough. And when her baby was born weeks later, healthy and strong, she held the child close and whispered, "We made it. We're free." Her journey had not been easy. She had been humiliated, abandoned, broken. But she rose, stronger than before, proving that fate always finds its way back to those who suffer unjustly. And as Marcus watched from the shadows of his crumbling empire, he finally understood. The woman he left in the street had become the storm that destroyed him. So my wonderful friends, here we are at the end of this story. If you've stayed with me until now, it must mean something touched your heart along the way. Elena's journey is more than just drama. It is a reminder for all of us. Life will betray us, break us, humiliate us, but as the Stoics taught, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond that defines your destiny. Marcus chose arrogance and cruelty. Elena chose resilience and faith. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." And isn't that what we saw? A woman once abandoned in the street rose again, not only to protect her child, but to rebuild her dignity, to claim her rightful place in the world. Maybe you too are facing a storm right now, loss, betrayal, loneliness. Let Elena's story remind you that storms don't last forever. Pain is real, but so is healing. And when you choose courage over despair, you rise higher than those who tried to bury you. Marcus thought he had the final word, but fate always delivers justice in its own time. So I ask you, my dear friends, what storm are you walking through? And can you see the seed of strength that is planting inside you? If this story moved you, if it gave you even a little hope, then do me this favor. Like this video, share it with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep walking these journeys together. Because none of us are truly alone. And as Elena proved, even from the darkest nights, we can rise again.